Leverage. It's a conversation I have with people almost on a daily basis. Well, it doesn't actually talk about leverage, it talks about hook pulls. The sort of conversation goes, Mark, I need a rod that I can really whack a lead with, but I also want it to not suffer from hook pulls. And it's a sort of a bit of a strange one because people assume that a stiff rod creates hook pulls. And they come to that sort of reasoning based around the fact that the rod feels stiff to them. But it's actually the complete opposite end of the stick for the fish. I've covered this in a previous video, which I'm going to put a link in the description and up later on. But basically, in essence, the stiffer the rod is, the softer it is on the fish, which is completely strange. But it basically comes down to the fact that the rod with a low resistance to bending, what we commonly would call soft, has a habit of bending over quite easily, and thus it reduces its overall arc length. It just seems to be less long, and ergo it doesn't put as much leverage against you. Now James and I are mucking around and doing some experiments. As you can see, we're in the field, we're next to the Thames, and he's pulling like crazy, and I'm reading off the readout. And what I'm doing is reading the sort of pulling force on the rod. And right now we're using a little 1 pound test curve specialist float, and now a 3 1/4, and we're swapping between them. And I'm putting the scales at exactly the same position height-wise, because the rods have obviously got different handle lengths, as you can see. So I'm making sure that everything is accurate as we can be. So we're pulling from the same position, but we can't pull the same forces. So we're just making a note of all the numbers, and we're going to do the number crunching later on. Now, again, we assume that a soft rod is soft on the fish and a stiff rod is hard on the fish, and it is the opposite way around due to simple leverage. And I get a little frustrated having this conversation time and time again, but it's really understandable why people assume this. One, it feels that way. It literally feels that way. It feels really hard on you when you're using a stiff rod, and you think it translates to the fish. And also, every single rod review you've ever seen on YouTube, in the magazines, etc., the so-called expert rod reviewer spills out the same myth time and time again. Now, we've got some stats coming up here. You might want to pause it, but they're on the screen for quite some time. And my boy James has done the number crunching for me. And on the left-hand panel, it's the 1 pound test curve, and on the right-hand, it's the 3 1/4. And basically in red writing down the bottom, the mean average, that is the percentage force that it equates to for how much hook pressure is on for pulling. So in other words, if you're pulling at X kilograms, 18.19% of that is on the 1 pound test curve, and on only 15%, give or take, on the stronger one. So the evidence is there showing that a stiff rod puts less hook pressure on for the same amount of pulling force. And the physics proves it as well. You watch my other video, me ranting and raving on about it. But I do squarely blame this myth on the so-called rod reviewers. If every time you hear somebody saying about a lovely soft action rod stops hook pulls, it's just marketing. It's just bullshit. And now you know the reality of it. Leverage. Well, that's my job done, and here's the link coming up later on to the other one. You can listen to me in the workshop waffling on for about 10 minutes about it again. Putting the rods away now, put my deeper back on it. Not that I was using the deeper for this, but that's my fine feed specialist, and I always like to keep the deeper on it. So I hope you've enjoyed the video about leverage and enjoy the statistics. But basically, in essence, stiff rods put less pressure on the hook than soft rods due to the fact that they become relatively shorter. The soft rod, that is. If you like what you saw, you can click the subscribe button to see all my future videos.